Welcome to Breathe California TV. Breathe California is the lung health organization for California, and we're headquartered here in San Jose. Each week on Monday at 7 p.m., we present a program of interest to you relating to lung health. Today it's Malisha Kumar, who's been on 3 times before. She's an expert on California's, I keep wanting to say new law, but at this point it's getting to be old law, legalizing marijuana. And we're going to talk about it because it's very confusing in terms of how it works with the way California adopted. And we'll also talk about President Biden has been talking about administratively lightening up on the federal law that prohibits the use of marijuana, or maybe I should say cannabis. In any case, we're going to watch a public service announcement to tell you a little bit more about Breathe California, and we'll be back in 30 seconds.
My name is Rene Montez. I've been using the CPAP machine, I would guess 10 years. I got so accustomed to it, I don't go anywhere without it. I take it with me everywhere. From the moment I put it on, I thought it was the greatest thing because the breathing was a lot easier, and after using it for a couple nights, I felt a lot of energy. Breathe California is fabulous.
We're back. Thanks for sticking with us. Our guest today on Breathe California TV is Malisha Kumar, who runs a organization called The Apothecary in Morgan Hill. And they've been amazingly expert in the past on how California is putting together its cannabis legalization law. So when did that happen, Malisha?
Well, we went completely legal in November of 2016. So we're going on.
Which is to say the law passed when?
5 years ago.
Yeah, so it was 2016?
2016, correct.
But if I recall, there are all sorts of dates for different things to get done to open up the process.
Yeah, so we had full legalization. So we started with medical legalization, and that was Prop 215. Then we had Prop 64 in 2016 that was supposed to start the process of legalization. However, what the state then decided to do was allow each county to decide how they wanted to implement cannabis in their county. And then the county then decided to turn that responsibility over to the individual cities. And so because of that,
all 58 counties did that?
Yes. So now we are waiting for individual cities to enact their local ordinances to allow for retail cannabis sale and grow. So that's where we're at.
Do you know if San Jose and Campbell, which is where our TV audience is, have either of those cities done that?
San Jose has. San Jose's done a wonderful job with putting their ordinances in place and finally getting and cracking down on the cannabis industry in San Jose. We have 16 dispensaries. And then Campbell has not opened up.
Well, it's much smaller community, unlike San Jose, that's about 1.1 million people.
Correct.
Campbell's maybe 50, 60,000.
Correct. And you're very close to San Jose when you're in Campbell, so the drive to get to it isn't too bad.
Yeah, my experience is a lot of people in both places don't know whether they're in Campbell or San Jose.
Yeah.
So I didn't prep you on it, but do you know what the president's been saying about cannabis enforcement? It's still illegal federally.
It's still illegal federally. at the end of the last administration, there was some talk of bringing forward some legislation, but that never happened in time. And now that we've got the new administration coming in, we seem to be seeing a bit of a pause in the moving forward of legalization of cannabis. But I do know that it is a priority. It's just waiting to see when that priority will come forward within the administration.
So since we last did a show, which is a year ago, at least some states have legalized it. I get the New York Times on the weekend, and all sorts of state officials there bragging about how much money they're going to make.
Yeah.
So any other states you can think of in the last year?
New York's a big one. New York just went ahead and legalized. Off the top of my head, Minnesota, I believe, went legal. Michigan, a lot of our southern states, Virginia is the first one to go legal. I'm sorry, a lot of their states in the middle of the country are really starting to take on this, at least starting to talk about it. So we've had quite a few states in the past year in 2020 that decided to go ahead with legalization, probably because of the pandemic. And it's considered an essential business, so it would add to, the revenue base and employment. So hopefully we'll see all our states, and then the federal government will have no choice, hopefully, to go ahead and legalize.
Yeah, it's pretty doggone hard to have two different overlapping laws. I think on past shows I mentioned one of my students was arrested in Yosemite when he had a doctor's permit to use medical marijuana, and the forest ranger didn't give a hoot in Yosemite about it.
Yeah, but people don't understand that even though we are legal fully in California, that doesn't apply to our federal lands. So Yosemite, or any of our national parks, airports, courts, anything that has a federal umbrella to it, it's still going to be considered illegal. And so there's been a high number of arrests in our national forests over the past few years.
Yeah, his was actually in Yosemite National Park. So he drove up there to fight it, got a court date, and then came back later. So it's a total of 3 trips to Yosemite.
Wow.
And the judge gave him a fine. So let's go back to this revenue issue. New York state legislators were bragging about how much money they were going to make. How real has that been in California?
In the very beginning, we didn't see the numbers that we thought we were going to see. And the reason for that is, as I explained before, the state allowed the counties to do the rollout, and then the counties pushed it to the city. So we didn't get as much tax revenue as we thought we were. But one of the maybe good things of COVID in 2020 is that California has seen a surplus in tax revenue, surpassing the last 4 years. We've raised $1 billion in tax revenues in 2020. And so if you compare the last quarter of 2019, the third quarter of 2019, it was $170 million. And this past quarter, third quarter of 2020, it's $306 million. So we've increased by 80%. And so it's been a boom to the industry this past year. And so looking at our economy with cannabis, I'm pretty confident that New York will be able to really generate income from their cannabis legalization.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds to me, based on what I recall of our past shows together, like it's coming together, because You know, when we did this a year and a half ago, we were still kind of waiting for the pieces all to fall together. So
Definitely, I think it's finally starting to come together, and even in how we're regulating it in California is changing in 2021, and I think it will be of benefit once we get it going.
So is some of that revenue going to the cities and counties?
Some of that, yes. So each city has a cannabis tax that they're allowed to impose on product. So that money is already going to the city, and then a percentage of the tax revenue goes to the county, and then the rest of it is going to the state.
So a place like Campbell is losing a revenue opportunity by not having gotten together on that.
Yeah, if you try and do some studies to see, what your population in Campbell is and how many of them are using medical cannabis and going to San Jose, not only is that retail revenue dollars being missed, but they're probably not collecting on the delivery as well. And that's a huge market. And so if you're not on top of it, your cities aren't able to collect that revenue.
Yeah, so we ought to explain that. My recollection is when we last did this show, they had just come up with the notion that you could call up a place in San Jose and get delivery to Campbell.
Correct. In the past, when we first were starting, delivery you weren't able to deliver into a city that did not allow cannabis retail. California then went and changed that regulation to allow for delivery in any city, regardless of whether or not they have cannabis ordinances in place. And so what that means is the cities are not able to collect that sales tax dollars. It's going to the city of origin where the delivery started from, not where the delivery is the final destination. There are mechanisms in place for cities to go and try and get those tax dollars, but in order to do that, you have to pull receipts, you have to have some sort of tracking mechanism, and I think that would be more complicated than it would be worth, really.
So our audience may remember, and you stated it right at the start of the program, that we voted to legalize medical marijuana several years before it was fully legalized. And we're going to take a break for about 30 seconds for another public service announcement from Breathe California, but we will talk about medical advantages and consequences of cannabis use when we get back. See you in 30 seconds.
The different therapeutic methods that we can help our very low socioeconomic status clients who have no alternatives, no anything, and there's still about 15 different resources we got out of this that if you have no resources, no service connection, you can still get aid.
That they are connected, one encourages the other, and that the process of change from backing off from the tobacco is the same as backing off from any other addictive drug.
Everyone can benefit from this training that we just were offered today. I would not take it back.
We're back. So Melissa, you want to talk about medical implications? It
Sure.
can be confusing. My wife has a violent form of dementia. And when she went into assisted living in 2018, the doctor there said she would quit if they used medical marijuana to try to calm her down some, which the executive director of the assisted living facility wanted to do. So it never happened, but obviously there's some controversy over the medical aspects.
Yeah, cannabis is something that we have used throughout human history as early as 8,000 BCE as for medicinal purposes. And it wasn't until the late 1800s, early 1900s that it really became illegal, and we decided to schedule it as a Schedule 1. So we haven't had the ability to do the research on the medical benefits and get real good science and data behind it because of that. But what we do know is that within the human body, we have a system called the endocannabinoid system, and it has these receptors. And those receptors, like THC and CBD and the different chemicals in cannabis. And when we have cannabis in our system and it's able to activate those receptors, that's when we can start looking at relieving things like pain, inflammation. In the case of your wife, we see that CBD can help with protecting damage in the brain. We can't stop it, but we can slow it down. And it does help with that agitation and helping with, being able to eat if somebody's on chemotherapy. And there's so many different ways to use cannabis medicinally. And it's just unfortunate that we aren't able to do the studies and get the medical community involved in a way that we should be able to.
So some people at Breathe, California were concerned that you and I were going to go out and tell everybody to start smoking cannabis. You want to talk about the health consequences of that?
Sure. Obviously, that is sort of one of the big arguments against cannabis use. If you are choosing to smoke or vape, that's something where you are taking in a foreign substance into your lungs, and you could potentially be doing more damage than good. However, we have so many different ways now to consume cannabis. We have tinctures, we have oils, we have edibles. You still have the traditional methods for the people that, are insistent on that's how they want to use it. But there's so many other ways and means of consumption. And I really try and steer people away from smoking or vaping, because it's really sort of it kind of negates the purpose, right, of the medical benefits, I feel, in my opinion,
Yeah, the people I talked to at Breathe, California are concerned about particles getting into the lungs, that smoking cannabis is definitely better than smoking cigarettes, but it's still a problem with particulates, that is, little tiny smoke particles getting lodged in your lung. Your lungs aren't capable of handling.
Yeah, there was a long-term study that was done that compared smoking cigarettes to smoking cannabis, and what they found was there is more substantial lung damage with smoking cigarettes for the nicotine, is something we've known. But with cannabis, they didn't see the same amount of damage, which was interesting. But again, you are taking in particles into your lungs and your lungs are very sensitive, or a very sensitive organ in our body. They're only meant for carbon and dioxide and oxygen exchange. They're not meant for, filtering smoke particles and vapes and all of that.
Yeah, they're basically designed for big particles, but when we evolved, we didn't have fires, which says a little bit about our species. What do we need to cover that I haven't hit? I'm so comfortable with you and I talking, I just figured we could talk off the cuff for our 28 minutes.
It's interesting because I've really focused a lot in the past on sort of the medical aspects of it and the legalization and regulation policy. The social justice aspect of it is something that I'm now starting to get into. And it's super interesting to see how our justice system is really lagging behind what Prop 64, what Prop 64 was about, which was expunging people that are in prison for misdemeanor and some felony, depending on what it is, and allowing those people to be released. And as of 2020, we still have over 200,000 inmates in prison who are still being held on cannabis misdemeanor charges that should have been released, 4 years ago, right? And now we've got COVID in the system, in the prisons, and we have overpopulation. And so if the goal was to pursue this social justice aspect of cannabis and look at how we sentence people, we're really lagging behind on that part of it. We're getting the revenue, we're getting the medical benefits, we're getting the education, but that social justice, criminal justice system aspect is lagging.
So the timing of your comments is good. Our next guest is Lupe Franco, and she's going to talk about environmental justice and our treatment of homeless and housing problems. And God bless Black Lives Matter. A year ago, I retired after 23 years of teaching at San Jose State. But it really seems to me that Black Lives Matter has perked up environmental justice, social justice, and ethnic and racial justice issues that largely had been ignored. So your show will run for 2 weeks and then we'll do Lupe's. So I hope everybody sticks with this on Monday nights. To go forward on your comment, my recollection is we had some counties and maybe it was judges that were trying to void or get rid of convictions and release people from county jails.
Yeah, we passed Prop 64 in November of 16, and then 2 years later, and that allowed for people to petition the judicial system to have their charge expunged. So first, it's already putting the onus on the inmate, right? I mean, I feel like it should almost be an automatic. You should be able to just go into the computer and say, this is what, these are the people that misdemeanor. Let's go. Okay, let's look at them. Okay, check out. I'm not understanding why we have to have the responsibility put on the inmate when they're in jail and they may not have access to the ability to do this. In 2018, then we have the state legislation passing AB 1793 that required the State Department to go through our criminal record system and find all those cannabis convictions and expunge them. So instead of doing that right from the beginning, we had to wait 2 years for somebody to tell the court systems to do this. And so now in 2018, we still had like over 200,000 convictions in our system that hadn't been looked at. And so it really is sort of frustrating to see we've made so much progress on, bringing in the revenue and the income and all of that for our state, but we're lagging on helping the people that have been disproportionately, put in prison for something that at this point is, nothing.
Well, it's all the more worse because it costs so much to keep an inmate. The costs are higher than the tuition at private colleges. So, you just multiply 200,000 times 50,000 and you're saving, what, $1 billion right there?
Yeah, I think I looked up the cost of housing an inmate a few years ago, and it was upwards of almost $100,000 a year for one inmate, right? And so now we've got over 600,000 inmates on misdemeanor cannabis convictions. How much money is that that's being wasted where it could be put for other things, right?
Absolutely.
And then the disproportion.
Plus the factors of the overcrowding that they have It's just far more humane to lighten up on that. So
Right.
another comment I'll make is my wife was a federal judge for 23 years, and the federal judges that I knew when she was doing that would have been aghast if they were being told to go check and clean up convictions. It's just it's such a massive task. The automatic system that you're talking about makes more sense.
Exactly. You know, again, our criminal justice system, it's a system that does the job it needs to do when it's working, but it's so bogged down and so complicated. And for a lot of these people, they don't have the education or the means to educate themselves in order to start the process of being able to get out. And I just don't think that's fair. And especially when a large proportion of the population that are in prison for misdemeanor cannabis are of color. You know, you have 45% are Latino, and 32% are about Black, and then you have 20% are white. And I haven't gone back and looked at what percentages have been released, and I'm curious to see if there is a disparity in, you know, how many, you know, Black versus white have been released.
Absolutely. So we just got a signal. We have 2 minutes left. I wanted to ask you about a problem we discussed in previous shows, which is we had substantially more illegal cannabis being produced than the new law would allow to be used. How badly does illegally grown cannabis undercut the system at this point?
It's there. I think we're starting to get a handle on it. We're starting Governor Newsom was quick to allocate some certain resources for law enforcement to be able to find these illegal grows and shut them down. I think with the consolidation of how our regulations are administered, we're going to go down from three different organizations to one organization, the Department of Cannabis Control. And under that way, we can now consolidate and centralize our efforts in how we go after the illegal market. And so I think we're starting to get there. And I think once we get everything consolidated and our resources put together, we'll be able to make forward movement. I think also with more cities onboarding and allowing for retail, especially seeing the income revenue from 2020, it's all going to come together. And I think we'll see a lot more changes in 2022 for the good.
So we got about 30 seconds left. So I just want a quick answer on this question is, are we still selling a lot of illegal cannabis, illegally grown cannabis elsewhere? Most of our neighbors, Oregon and Washington, have legalized it. I don't know about Nevada and Arizona, but it would seem to me that they might want to undercut things.
That is something I haven't looked into. I would imagine that the illegal market, even though we are starting to get a hold on it, it's still pretty strong, and they still are able to benefit just within our own region. But I wouldn't doubt if they were.
So Melissa, I really appreciate you joining us. I've gotten a signal to wrap up here. So as always, I thank you for an update, and we'll be doing another one maybe in 6 months. So
Great.
keep track of everything different. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.